Welcome back, everyone. Believe it or not, I'm not recording this at night. It is extremely hot, mostly humid, and I'm keeping the lights off to try and reduce some of that. Obviously, not all of them are, as you can see from the reflection there, but the ones here, so bear with me. This is absolutely a recording that could do with visuals, but I'll be a little lazy about it. I wanted to talk about testing since we're going to lead up to Worlds. And there's a new set that is, at the time of this recording, just a few days from being in people's hands. Officially, it's already in a number of people's hands if you go watch like any videos, any streams, whatever. Obviously, we've known the set for a while. And in speaking with a lot of locals and other people out there on the great grand internet, I think a lot of people don't really know how to test or test properly, and I don't think it's that they're incapable, but like anything, no one's good at it the first time they do something, whether you're learning the game, building decks, or testing in this case. I might have to turn a light on because it keeps going in and out of focus, and it's actually bothering me. So I'm going to risk cooking here a little bit by turning a light on. So back to the topic at hand. This may be a little bit longer than my usual thing, so we'll just see how this goes. The first thing is, I think that, and I'm going to quote, well, paraphrase a Pokemon pro, Azul Garcia here. He put it very succinctly, and I've repeated this a lot in person on stream, etc. He had said at one point, this is years ago, the first time I heard him say it, that people don't play enough games of Pokemon to be upset at the results they get. And if you replace Pokemon with Star Wars Unlimited or whatever game you or whatever project you happen to be working on, I think that holds true. Of course, there are people who are talented. Of course, there are people who are naturally good at certain things. But for most of us, myself included, you just kind of need to work your ass off to get to where you want to be. And if you decide that the trade-off of the amount of effort or the results is not worth it, that's okay. But you can't necessarily be upset that like, oh, well, I only finished 3 and 4 at a PQ or something, or 4 and 3 or 5 and 2 or whatever it happens to be. If you did not put in the extra effort, if you left effort on the table, so to speak, and you didn't test those extra games, you didn't try out those other lines, you didn't theorize what your other sideboard options were or other things. Like, there's a long list. So there's that. And I think that more people need to play more games, just play games in general. It doesn't have to necessarily be with, this is my tournament deck, this is whatever. Now, I'm not saying go out there and play your favorite Holdo concoction. You need to be playing real things that are meaningful. But if the option is play 0 games or play the Holdo concoction, you should probably play the Holdo concoction at least, right? Play games. The corollary to this is that people don't play enough, in my opinion, meaningful games. And by that, I mean, you could go on Petra and grind out thousands of games, and it does not matter. It is almost equivalent to doing nothing because you're doing it wrong. And by that, let's take that apart. Imagine that you haven't been to the gym in years. I haven't. I mean, it kind of shows, but you remember like, oh, this is roughly what I do or what I did when I was in high school or something. But you go in there and you just slam a bunch of weight on there and you try and bench press, you try and squat, you try and leg press, you try and, lat pull down, whatever, pick an exercise. First of all, you don't really know what your weight is or an appropriate weight. You're either going to over or underwork yourself, most likely. And it's entirely possible you physically injure yourself because you just got in there and started slinging things instead of going in with the appropriate mindset and going in with an actual plan. And that's what I mean by testing. You are actively hurting yourself. I know it sounds contradictory to the first point of play a bunch of games, but you need to go in with the appropriate mindset to learn. I'm going in and I'm not trying to win this game. I'm trying to go in and see, does this card fit? Am I resourcing this card all the time? Something like SWU stats is actually incredibly helpful. You could do it in a spreadsheet, but SWU stats obviously pulls things itself. You could add data yourself to it. You could look at other people's data. But you need to go in and have a hypothesis of, okay, I think that this card helps Vader beat Han2 Blue. And then you need to make sure that every single game you're trying to find that card, for example, like you hard mulligan for it, or I don't resource it, even if it would be the correct thing to do here, so that you can maximize the number of looks at that particular card, or interaction, or sequence, or scenario, or whatever. Similarly, be willing to roll things back, and this is going to segue into the next point, but be willing to roll things back, like when you're physically playing in real life, or don't be afraid that your opponent's going to flip out online because, oh no, you undid something. Well, yeah, it was clearly bad, so of course I undid it. It was a misclick. It was whatever. The point is it's a tool for the purpose of testing, and you should always want your opponent to be playing optimally. So certainly let other people take stuff back. But that kind of leads into the next point, which is getting trusted testing partners. Now, this could be a team officially. It could just be your friends. It could be somebody that you trust because they put up results, because you know them, well, you know, like whatever the relationship is online, you know, something like that. But you need to find people, because you personally are not going to have all the answers. It's not possible. You could be the best player in the world, but guess what? Are you better than the next 9 people? Like, say you were out of the top 10, you are literally the number 1. Are you better than the 9 people who are behind you if they were working collaboratively? Probably not, right? And I think pick any skill level and you could say the same. So people working together, but in conjunction with the first 2 points, you need to have people that you trust, that are going to play well, that they're not just doing their random brews unless, you know, you think you're really stumbling on something. There's a place for that. But if it's time to run the gauntlet, it's run your random brew into Sabine, into the Han2 Blues, into the Kiras, not your Holdo pile, because that doesn't tell you anything. So you need to go in, you need to play enough. You need to play with the mindset that you're trying to learn. Identify, okay, well, I need to do XYZ in this matchup because if I do ABC, it leads down a bad path and then it gives me less outs, less options, less choices. Or I'm taking this route because it limits my opponent's choices, whatever the case may be. And then you have to have people that you trust, that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can talk to, because you're just simply not going to be able to put it all together yourself. Certainly not when we're talking about in the context of Galactics. It's a short time frame. Could you figure it out based on research and data and all that kind of stuff? Looking at past events and things like that? Absolutely. There was a weird fuzz flying by there. I just saw it, like over here. What was that? That distracted the hell out of me. So the point is that you are under a time crunch pretty much at all times, because real life gets in the way. Nobody's doing this full time. There are no Star Wars Unlimited pros that have just up and quit their jobs so that they can focus entirely on this game. I guess if you count the designers and the devs, because that is their job. But anyway, you get the point. So you're always going to be under some sort of time constraint. And the question is, how are you going to achieve the goal that you set out at, we'll call it step 0, before you started playing games, before you were playing those games with the mindset, the correct mindset, before you had the testing partners? What was your goal and how are you going to get there? Is it to win a PQ? Is it to top 8 a PQ? Is it just to have a winning record? Is it to do well at a regional, a sector, Galactics, your locals, whatever? And I think the reality of this situation is that a lot of people just say, I want to win. Okay, well, what does winning mean to you? Because if you get focused on, I'm winning my testing games, you're not properly testing. Testing is, as the word it doesn't even just imply, just says, you're practicing. This is not the game. If you played sports when you were a kid or in high school or college or whatever, you had lots of practices, and the practices were always intended to be more difficult, at least in my experience. They were intended to be more difficult than the game themselves because you're trying to prepare for a thing. Then your body and your mind are prepared so that when you go into actual game day, you know exactly where you need to be. Part of this is learning the patterns, learning the interactions, and learning what you need to know so that you can relieve some brain stress, relieve some pressure so that when you're in the actual games, you're sitting in round 7 on the bubble, that you don't have to second guess certain lines, and then you can take more time to think about, okay, well, I saw this. What does that, you can make the more involved and intricate decisions in the moment because you have this wealth of experience behind you, informing you in these situations, they are likely doing this. Until you hit top 8, you're not going to see deck lists. If they get you with some super secret tech, it happens. Because remember, it's a card game and things aren't ever 100-0. Somebody could just brick 8 turns in a row after they mulligan, and guess what? They lost. So you need to just find what are the most likely to win lines, interactions, relationships between archetypes, different things to attack the meta, etc. The point is to try and maximize your chances. You're never going to get them to be 100%. It's the way it is. You ask any major tournament winner, they're going to tell you that, yeah, luck plays in as part of it because over the course of a gazillion games, when you're talking a large-scale tournament, that you can't account for everything. And sometimes your deck just decides it wants to take a vacation. It happens. But you need to put in all the effort beforehand so that you know that when you're playing, you are making all of the right choices that give you the best chance to actually come away with a W. It's very easy to chalk things up to luck. And I think one of the attitude adjustments that a lot of people need to make is assume that you misplayed. Assume that you made a mistake and find that mistake. Every game you are making a mistake, like, without fail. What is that mistake? Whether your opponent capitalized on it or not is irrelevant, because if you make that mistake against opponent A in round 1, that is going to be dramatically different than the finals against opponent B. Because opponent B obviously earned their way to the finals too, and they are more likely to capitalize on that mistake than the other person. Now, this is stepwise. You're just going to have to find it, and then when you level up as a player, you'll say, oh yeah, I've been making all these mistakes. And then you try and correct those on a regular basis. And then you'll level up again. And then you repeat the process on and on and on. And obviously this changes for every set because then we have all this new information to incorporate into this process. So I just wanted to talk a few minutes about that. This is already longer than I normally do, although the last few have been kind of long. If you're interested in more thoughts on this, I have a lot to say about it. It's way more involved than just what I'm describing because each of these high-level things are, of course, broken down into smaller components. I think it's a universal thing that applies to Star Wars Unlimited as well as other games, and people just, I mean, to bring back the working out analogy, you can pick anything. It is, if you're not going in with the appropriate process, it's garbage in, garbage out. You're working really hard. You could be working incredibly hard and quite literally just wasting your time. Maybe you'll eventually get to, the epiphany, but how long is that going to take? Because Worlds is in a few weeks. And if you discover that epiphany in time for Worlds 2028, doesn't really help you much, right? That's what I'm getting at. That's going to do it for this time. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time for more Random Thoughts.